I'm Will Aubrey. Time for the Improbability Engine's after show, and today we're going to talk about hymns. I'm joined by my buddy Joe Darnell, and I've got some favorites, and I know you do too, Joe.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing to me. First off, it's hard to describe growing up in the state of Kentucky when I did without talking about the music of church. For me, it always reminds me of my grandmother. She's an open to close churchgoer. If the doors are open, she's there, and she doesn't leave till the doors close. So, she's just that kind of person. And so for me growing up, it was a matter of hearing this music that was, it's religious in nature, but a lot of it was very old, these were things that everybody knew the words to because they'd grown up singing it and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of really good music there. And in this instance, we're not trying to proselytize or we're not trying to, evangelize to anybody. We're just talking about, in our history, the music of the church that has struck us and moved us in interesting ways. And I think there's something there for everybody.
And I've attended a lot of different denominations. I'm currently a Mormon. I go to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but before that I was Catholic. I was baptized in the Church of Christ. So, yeah, you're right. We don't intend to favor one denomination over another.
Or even Christianity over others.
There are great songs in all denominations.
Absolutely.
And we're just telling you about some of our favorites.
Exactly. And for me, I grew up in a Church of Christ, which is, I don't know how it is elsewhere. Around here, the Church of Christ has no musical accompaniment.
The Church of Christ I was baptized in had an organ played by the pastor's wife.
That's why I wanted to clarify, because as far as I'm concerned, there's no set rhyme or reason for some of this stuff. I've gone to churches where they've had a full band play, electric guitars and amplifiers, and that stuff just kind of happens. That's fine. That's totally cool. But going from my experience, we sang everything a cappella, and that was.
And I think that's fine.
Well, and what it does is it just changes things. It changes the natures of these songs. I've heard some good church bands, and I've heard some really trying hard church bands, and I've heard, you bring up the Mormon church, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir is world-renowned for their musical ability. Of course, in Catholicism, you have everything from Gregorian chant, which is as old in Catholicism as you can get, but is still beautiful and powerful. And then you go all the way to modern day. And
I'm going to let you start with one of your favorites.
Okay, so when I talk about a cappella music, I'm not a musician by trade, so I'm going to screw up the terminology on all this stuff. So just kind of be forewarned. What I loved about church music whenever I was growing up was that this natural tendency to split the voices, and you had call and response songs. And so the first one that I want to bring up is Our God, He is Alive. The best part about this is whenever I go to church, my grandmother has a very high-pitched singing voice, and my grandfather, when he went to church, would always had this very deep baritone voice. And so in this song in particular, there is a call and response, talking about there is a God, He is alive, He is alive. And so you have this call and response that separates the voices high and low, and then joins back up into the end of it. And so it's a very powerful song. I don't know if you're familiar with the song.
I'm not. One of the better memories that I have from my childhood, we would, for recreation when I was a kid, go driving.
Okay.
Kids today might find that odd. But we'd just get in the car, and Dad would say, let's see if we can get lost. And
which we used to do as kids, too, because,
we would go for a drive. And my mom and Dad would sing hymns. And one of the hymns that they would sing in the car was In the Garden. I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses,
Yeah.
And I can almost hear them in my head singing that song.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's for many of us, and I think this is a far more universal song that even people who are outside of the Christian faith are familiar with, is the song Amazing Grace. I mean, you hear that song, and it doesn't matter, that it's a church song, because it's got an appeal that expands even beyond that. And I think that's very similar. It's evocative. It brings you to a point in the past, and there's something powerful about that.
Something interesting about that song, though, the lyrics they use in the Catholic Church are different from the lyrics that they use in evangelical churches.
Okay.
In evangelical churches, it's Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Right.
In the Catholic Church, it's Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved and set me free. I suppose that the idea of people being wretches doesn't fit with Catholic theology well enough for them to be comfortable with singing it. That's the only thing that I can think of. But
and that's something I did not know. I didn't know that there was a difference. But that's interesting to me. And when we talk about these songs, one of the things we have to acknowledge is their place in the oral history tradition. For a lot of these songs, prior to them being published in the little hymnals that are found in churches all over the place, these were brought with people from one place to another, and oftentimes they would be remembered and not necessarily written down. And so you get shifts in some of these songs, and they take on a more local flavor. And I think that happens as well in denominations. These are songs that, for instance, in Amazing Grace, you're talking about something that was written in the second half of the 18th century. It was, 1780s or so when it really began to get popular. That's a long time for a song to be in the public lexicon. There's bound to be shifts. I mean, you're talking about an oral history tradition that kind of goes with it. Those things change.
Now, an LDS hymn, it's one of my favorites, and I have a little story behind it. It's called Day Dawn is Breaking. And just from the lyrics a little bit, the day dawn is breaking, the world is awaking. The clouds of night's darkness are fleeing away. The worldwide commotion from ocean to ocean now heralds the coming of the beautiful day. Beautiful day of peace and rest. Bright be thy dawn from east to west. Hail to thine earliest welcome ray. Beautiful, bright millennial day. And then the fourth verse. Now, I love this. The first line of the fourth verse is, then pure and supernal, our friendship eternal. I really, really like that. Now,
it's a bit verbose.
One thing, here's the story behind it. I was in Louisville with my best friend Becky. We were at her church, and she was holding the hymnal, and we were singing out of the, looking at the same hymnal and singing out of it. And by the way, the reason I thought of this hymn was the glorious, beautiful day we have in Murray, Kentucky today with the blue sky.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's incredible. But so we're singing this song, and I get the tempo wrong, and at one point I sing a word when no one else is singing.
Or as I like to call that, a Church of Christ solo.
And then, of course, that made Becky grin. And then when I saw her grin, I just completely lost it. And I didn't laugh out loud. I managed to contain myself.
Well done.
But I was just covering up, and I lost it.
Yeah, that's one of those church giggles are the worst, because once you get them, they just won't stop. You've almost got to get up and leave, because it's one of those, you're just going to keep going. The fact that you held it in, kudos to you. Well done. That's a good one. Okay, so my next one would probably be Rock of Ages. Another old song that is one I listened to as a kid growing up. It's incredible to me, the story behind some of these songs, and this is not to be confused with Rock of Ages by Def Leppard or Rock of Ages, that it's not the Broadway musical, not quite the same thing, but a fantastic song anyway, and one that the concept of Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in me. A powerful concept of vulnerability there that I think is missing in a lot of the overly self-assured modern Christian rock that comes out. It's
Christian rock, that would be crock, right?
Something like that. Yeah. It's the newer stuff leaves me.
I basically stole that from you.
Did you really? That's pretty good. That's okay. You can steal that. I give it freely. It can't be stolen. So
I'm going to move on to a Catholic hymn.
Okay.
Here I Am, Lord. And let me read the first little bit of this. I won't try to sing it.
Thank God.
I, the Lord of sea and sky, I have heard my people cry. All who dwell in darkened sin, my hand will save. I who made the stars of night, I will make their darkness bright. Who will bear my light to them? Whom shall I send? And then, here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. And as people may be able to tell, it's difficult for me to read those words without wanting to cry. But just the message there, I think, is awesome, because really the way that God works in this world is through us.
That's true, yeah. And I think there's something here that is, I think that kind of, even if you take a step back away from your own personal faith, you can look at these and you see the poetic value of it. There's something there that is moving and powerful, and it describes I believe, a universal human frailty, this understanding that we often feel vulnerable, we often feel, exposed, and we feel the dangers of the world around us, and there's always been a thought process that you turn to your faith in those situations, and I think that's true of every faith. I mean, I don't think that's a Christian concept. I think that's true of all faiths. I mean, whenever times are hard, that's what happens. People turn to their faith, and I think that you'll find with the poetic value of a lot of these songs, it's either an understanding of our own frailty, or exalting in the thought that we can overcome that frailty. And I think that's a very powerful sentiment on both directions. If it's something that we're talking about in ourselves and how weak, and how helpless we truly are, I'm reminded of the saying, dear God, thy sea is so great and my boat is so small. There's this feeling of being lost, and being helpless in a world around us that, quite frankly, we had no control over.
And I would like to talk about a couple of conversion experiences and songs related to those. First, the first time that I answered an altar call was at a Ford Philpott crusade. And he was an evangelist back in the 70s. And the song that they played was just as I am. And when I was baptized at the Church of Christ, that was the song that they were playing when I went up to be baptized. And, it always had an emotional impact on me. And then when I joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints last year, it was a dark and gloomy day. Sounds like the beginning of a novel. It was a dark and gloomy day. But it truly was. I mean, there were clouds everywhere. It looked like it was going to storm. And amazingly, right after my baptism, we sang this song. And as we sang this song, the clouds parted and the room was filled with sunlight. In a world where sorrow ever will be known, where are found the needy, the sad, and the lone, how much joy and comfort you can all bestow. If you scatter sunshine everywhere you go, scatter sunshine all along your way, cheer and bless and brighten every passing day, scatter sunshine all along your way, cheer and bless and brighten every passing day. And it was really amazing the way just suddenly, as we sang that song after the baptism, the room was filled with light.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to the universal concept that we're trying to make sense of things that are so far out of our own control. And we love to live with this illusion that we control things, that we have the ability, we have plans, and we have things, and we're going to go and do, and I don't have time for that, I've got things to do. And how often life completely throws that out the window and says, yeah, no, that's not going to happen.
Give me some more of your faith.
Okay, so one that was made famous yet again with the release of "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" is one that was done in that movie by Alison Crouch and Gillian Welch, and it's a song called "I'll Fly Away," which is a beautiful. It takes a sad undertone from something that should be sad, but that is exalting, and it's beautiful, and at its heart is this message of hope, which I think is true of religion of all kinds. Is this idea of hope, that hope is why you do these things, and but a beautiful song that is always evocative, that I always think about whenever I think of hymns. And it's just one that I think is fantastic, and that still it gets me a little choked up and makes me think of different times and folks like that. So it's a very powerful song, one of my favorites.
It's a great song. My mother and her sister sang that song on the radio when they were little girls. We had that song was played and sung at my mother's funeral, and I, of course, have to mention that I wrote a parody version of it.
Of course you did. Of course you wrote a parody version.
The Borg are coming, we'd better go. Let's fly away. Let's fly away, oh Geordie, let's.
So it's a
but
Star Trek
the original
Next Generation.
yes. The original is much better. Much better.
But that's all right. My whole thought is that the nature of the song explicitly says one thing, but I think there's an implicit desire. Those things are meant to be sung together. They're meant to be, they're supposed to be something that brings people together, and I think that's a powerful statement. So if you have to go to the world of Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek, The Next Generation, to find it, you know what, so be it. That's where you should be.
One of my favorite Christmas songs.
Ooh, I love Christmas songs.
Is the hymn Adeste Fideles.
Absolutely.
The amazing thing, though, is everybody knows "Come All Ye Faithful."
Yeah. I know all the words in Latin.
Well, so do I.
I'm not singing.
And the Latin does not mean the same thing as the English.
It does not. It's very, very different. No, what's funny is, so to give you a little insight into my own mind. All right, so freshman year of high school, I sign up for classes. They allow us to select our classes. And amongst the selections, you can choose a foreign language if you wish to take one. And I looked at it, I was like, I don't want to take Spanish. Everybody's taking Spanish. And I don't particularly want to take French. There's a lot of people taking French. I want to take German. My mother spoke German. My aunt spoke some German. It was one of those, like, this is perfect. I've got people who I can talk to in German. I'm going to be very good at German if I can take German. So I sign up for German. First day of school rolls around. I'm a freshman. I'm dorky and I'm awkward. And they hand me my schedule, and I'm looking through it. I'm like, all right, math class, got it. English class, cool. History class, yes. Latin class, that's not German. So I go and talk to the guidance counselor. I said, I'm sorry, there's a small mistake on my schedule. Everything else works really, really well. I have Latin. I signed up for German. I'm sure it was just somebody entered it wrong. So if you could just, change it over into German, that would be great. And the guidance counselor looked at me and said, oh no, there just weren't enough students who wanted to take German, so we put you in Latin class. And I remember looking down at my schedule and looking back up and going, but I don't want to take Latin. Why would I take Latin? What possible use would I have to take Latin? But I was a freshman, and instead I go, oh, okay, and walked to Latin class, where there were about 12 of us in this Latin class, and I proceeded to get the lowest C possible in a class ever, and I made a C in Latin. But one of the things we learned was Adeste Fidelis, which is, it's sung to the tune of O Come All You Faithful, and parts of it are similar, but like you were saying, it's not a direct translation.
No,
it's very, very different. But we learned that song, which is interesting.
Well, I took Greek when I was in college, and
of course you did.
And so, but anyway, after taking Greek, I wanted to major in classical languages. And so,
which is not crazy. I mean,
when I came to Murray State, I wanted to take Latin, and they didn't have Latin when I came to Murray State.
Right.
So I didn't get to do that. Didn't get to major in classical languages. But I tried to teach myself Latin and made a little progress. I tried translating the book of Genesis from Latin into English. So
one of the things that, and as we traipse along on this spur line of train of thought, one of the things that we did as part of our work was to translate the Aeneid from Latin, which is difficult. You're translating. I mean, for those of you who don't know, the Aeneid was one of the histories. So, like, you have the Odyssey by Homer, and you have these classic epics that are often cited, and there are some really great ones. I mean, there are some really, really great ones. Well, one that is supposedly, it's a Greco-Roman history that talks about the mythological founding of Rome and where that comes from. And it starts towards the end of the Trojan War, and a guy named Aeneas. And it's his story from the fall of Rome from the fall of Troy to the founding of Rome. And it's as dense as you might think. It is difficult. It caused me so much trouble. But I did finally manage to figure most of it out, and it didn't hurt that I read the English translation of the story and kind of got an idea of what was going on. But getting back to the hymn side of that, a beautiful song and one that is often is often kind of glossed over in "O Come All Ye Faithful," which is good, but is not. It's not the same. So if you get a chance, listen to both.
Do you have any other hymns?
Oh, there's so many. Here's my thought. There are so many really great hymns out there, and some of the ones that I grew up listening to, "Power in the Blood," or "Old Rugged Cross," or "How Great Thou Art." I mean, these are all...
What a friend we have in Jesus.
What a friend we have in Jesus, which is, I mean, quite frankly, you could start singing that. At a certain point in time, you could walk into a church before it started and just start singing it, and everybody would know the words. It's
what I always think of, though, when I think of what a friend we have in Jesus.
Please don't tell me it's Latin.
No. Bill Anderson has a song called "Mama Sang a Song," and he talks about the song talks about his mother singing, and he says at one point, "I've fallen asleep many times to the sound of What a Friend."
That's absolutely right. Well, and my grandmother would. Whenever we get back from church, certain times she'd be cooking hamburgers or something for lunch that day. We'd always have a cold breakfast on Sunday morning, but we always had a big lunch. That was kind of how that worked. And so we'd have a big lunch, and she'd be cooking and getting stuff together, and that was one of the songs she would hum or sing softly to herself in the kitchen. And so to this day, I always think of that song whenever I smell like fried chicken. When it's something that my grandmother does really, really well.
When do you smell like fried chicken? When you don't use deodorant?
When fried chicken is cooking and it smells really good. Whenever you're really hungry and it's the best smelling fried chicken you've ever smelled, that's when I can almost hear somebody humming "What a Friend We Have in Jesus." I mean, it's just one of those.
It's a great song.
It really is, and it's one that I think. It's one that's crossed over into a broader lexicon as well. The song takes a huge role in the Stephen King book The Stand, and the movies that are based on that. There are always these tie-ins that kind of guide that music in. And even if we talk about other music, and we talked about popular and secular music, a lot of these songs were the basis of a lot of different things. The chord progressions
and really quickly. Some of my favorite religious songs aren't technically hymns. Things like "Prepare Ye the Way of the Lord" from the musical Godspell.
Yeah.
"Spirit in the Sky"
by Norman Greenbaum. That's exactly what I was thinking, which is hilarious because the man was Jewish. I mean, "Walking in Memphis." The song "Walking in Memphis," there's a lyric that he talks about. He goes into a church and they said, "Are you a Christian child?" And he says, "Ma'am, I am tonight." And there is a musical draw that crosses cultural boundaries with a lot of these hymns, and I think it's a powerful statement. I think that's something that should be celebrated, and I think it often is, especially amongst music-minded people, even those who aren't, of that denomination or background. They always try to find that positive in that. And there's a lot of hymns that have become the basis for wonderful pop music.
Another great song from Godspell, "Day by Day." There are great songs from Jesus Christ Superstar, but for some reason, by and large, I don't find them nearly as pleasing or inspiring as the songs from Godspell.
I can appreciate that.
Anything else?
No, I think that just about covers it. I know that we've missed something. Comment, let us know where we've messed up. Let me know if my description of Latin is incorrect. I would love to have a discussion about that on Will's Facebook page. That's what we want to do, is talk about Latin. So, I mean, if you see it and you see something incorrect, please let Will know, and we'll talk about it and see if we can't make a response.
That brings to a close this edition of the Improbability Engine.